Hello, I'm Theolyn Cortens. I've been studying astrology from I don't know how long for, since I was a young girl and my aunt introduced me to astrology. I've also studied comparative religion, philosophy, literature, and angels. I've done academic studies about angels. And I've also, alongside my astrology, had a long-term interest in Jungian psychology. So today's topic leans on all that background. It's called Angels, Gods, and Archetypes. And I think some of the ideas that we can pick up from all these wisdoms can be profoundly helpful when we are addressing the problems, personal and collective, that face us in the modern world. In ancient times, our ancestors experienced their world in a very different way. They observed the movements of the wandering planets and the fixed stars in the sky, and they noticed how the changes in the sky were reflected in their human, social, and personal affairs. And from this arises the famous Hermetic saying, as above, so below. The astronomers in those days were also astrologers. They were interested in calculating how the heavenly activities might provide clues to living their lives efficiently, getting the satisfaction out of being human. Mostly they were employed by monarchs who wanted to know about the likelihood of feast or famine, whether the crops would fail, for example. They also wanted to know what their enemies might be up to and whether the king would die. Their science was concerned with timing, when to do something, when to wait. They identified planets and stars as having an influence of some kind, and for them, this meant they must be gods. There was a family of gods with a hierarchy in which the big father god was chief honcho. These statues date to the time of the Sumerian civilization in the Middle East, approximately 2,500 years BCE. So around 4,000 years or more from our time. Now this is the oldest image of a zodiac we have discovered and dates around 50 BCE. This version comes from Egypt. The zodiac is an imaginary band in the sky, a circle of 360 degrees, and all the planets appear to be moving through this band. The sun, we now know, doesn't move around the Earth, but from where we stand, it still has the appearance of moving through the zodiac, which is equally divided into 12 so-called signs. These were originally called houses. But the Greeks, a couple of thousand years later than the Babylonians, were also preoccupied with what the gods were up to and whether they could calculate the best opportunities that would allow individuals to map out their path of destiny. This is when the personal horoscope or individual birth chart was developed for everyday people and not just for kings. For the Babylonians, the Egyptians and the Greeks, there were only 7 heavenly bodies, the ones that could be seen with the naked eye, because it took obviously many more centuries before telescopes were invented, and then they revealed that our solar system has more planets circling through the zodiac. But for the Greeks and the Romans, these 7 are named as gods, and these are very well known to us. The Greek myths tell us how they understood the activities and influences of their chief gods. They've also left us stories about a multitude of lesser characters who give their names to fixed stars or constellations. The Egyptians observed the rising and setting of the fixed stars and took note of coincidental effects. For example, they wanted to know when the Nile would flood. Some modern astrologers also look at the placement of these stars on your birth chart, as well as looking at the planetary positions. These ancient people were very pragmatic. They wouldn't have spent their time and resources identifying the cycles of time and the effects of various planetary activities if they hadn't achieved any practical results. Modern scientists despise astrology as an ancient superstition, but I'd like to suggest our ancestors knew a trick or two, and we would be wise to get a handle on why this might work as a useful, practical tool for living a satisfactory life. The Jewish people were exiled to Babylon around 600 years BCE, and for a period of at least half a century, they were influenced by the Babylonian culture, and they were confronted by the idea that there were many gods, not just one. However, the notion that a chief god might have a supporting council of junior gods, or possibly sons, seems to have been imported into a Jewish system in which the great Yahweh is in charge of Bene Elohim, the sons of gods, and these were interpreted as celestial powers, or archangels. Perhaps the Jews saw images like this. Modern scholars have suggested that the Assyrian wall images that show a sacred tree being protected by winged figures was the origin of the Jewish tree of life in the Kabbalistic system. In one ancient biblical text, which is included in the Catholic Bible in the Apocrypha, but is not included in the Jewish or Protestant Bibles, we find the story of a poor young man, Tobias, who goes on a journey to meet a cousin who has money. Another traveller volunteers to go with him, supports his journey, and later reveals himself to be the Archangel Raphael, who says, "I am Raphael, one of the 7 spirits who stand before the throne." Now, this early scripture, which is dated around the 2nd century BCE, tells us that the Jewish people had adopted the idea that the 7 planets are like angels or spirits who are subservient messengers, malachim in Hebrew. They are the messengers of Yahweh, who sits on the throne. So here is a Tree of Life version showing how the 7 spirits line up with 7 sephirot. Those are centres of light energy, almost like flowers, sometimes called jewels, on the Tree of Life. And each archangel can be associated with one of the 7 heavenly bodies in classical astronomy and astrology. So what I want to show you is how the gods from ancient Babylon and ancient Greece can be identified with the archangels that come down to us through the Jewish mystical tradition. But the next question is, how does that work for us thousands of years later? Are there any practical advantages in our everyday life or our spiritual life? So this is where modern psychology comes into play. In the 20th century, we were blessed with powerful new psychological theories. And the work of Carl Jung is exceptionally important in our quest for meaning and life satisfaction. In some ways, Jung was only repeating what Jesus had said. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Although we mustn't forget The contrary of that must also be true. The kingdom of hell is within you. So, how can we gracefully direct ourselves towards the heavenly option? Jung understood archetypes as universal patterns and images that derive from the collective unconscious. They are inherited potentials which enter our personal or collective consciousness as images or manifest in behaviour or action. They are hidden forms which are given expression by individuals and their cultures. The existence of archetypes can be deduced indirectly by using story, art, myth, religion, or dreams. So we can say the gods and the archangels are archetypes. They exist in the realm of human consciousness, but they also dwell in the even deeper, vaster consciousness of the whole cosmos. They arise in our consciousness because we are made of cosmic stuff. Many archetypes reappear through history in different forms, especially in the arts. In Shakespeare's plays, Falstaff represents the archetype of the god Jupiter. Expansive, generous, but perhaps sometimes over the top. We describe such a character as jovial, from Jupiter's other name, Jove. We also find archetypes in the commercial world. The commercialised character Father Christmas is another jovial development. We humans have created these characters in drama and fiction and in marketing, but they have their own reality as archetypes in our collective unconscious. And this is why they keep reappearing in different guises. But here is the really important bit. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Jung realised that the inner kingdom of the gods or angels would direct our lives until we realise what is actually going on and take responsibility. In Greek myths, the gods are constantly squabbling with each other, just as our personal wants and needs are often competing. The realised self knows what is going on. Internally, it observes the inner drama. Then it takes charge of these gods and becomes self-directed in his or her everyday life. So we have a new saying, as within, so without. Everything going on within our individual and collective psyche is mirrored back to us from our outer reality. The astrological birth chart is a map of our individual psyche. So we look at the map and notice what the archetypes are up to, what drama or script they are playing out. Then we get to be the director of the play, or the monarch in the kingdom. We direct our own story. We take charge of our inner kingdom and decide whether to opt for heaven. Right now, there is a big archetypal battle going on in the collective psyche of humanity, manifesting in catastrophic ecological disasters and malevolent behaviour by religious and political extremists. But let us keep in mind that the outer reality of human society is an exact reflection of our collective consciousness. And remember, each one of us has individual responsibility to not only seek personal satisfaction and self-realisation, but to recognise that we can contribute to a paradigm shift for human consciousness by resolving our personal inner tensions. When we check out the planetary gods and what they're up to right now, we realise the present social upheavals coincide with a major conjunction between Saturn, Lord of Time, and Pluto, Lord of the Underworld, Keeper of Wealth, Bringer of Transformation. Saturn wants to maintain existing social structures. Pluto wants us to make a breakthrough. And Pluto has the most clout in this confrontation. As far as I can see, Saturn cannot win. Resistance is useless. The old structures will have to go, and we should be joyful. So how does this work out in your personal life? You can investigate this by getting a birth chart. That's easily available, quite free, by using online systems. There are plenty of websites around where you can put in your birth data and get a chart. So you need to find out where Saturn and Pluto conjunction is placed in your personal chart, and you'll need your birth time in order to discover that. So the Saturn-Pluto conjunction will be in one of the houses, and that will be the house or the arena, the scenario where that Saturn-Pluto conjunction will be focused, will be perhaps bringing up some really tricky stuff for you. But it's a window of opportunity, it's a crisis-opportunity, as they say, because the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is a match between, a duel, if you like, between Saturn, who wants to hold on to the old ways, and Saturn thinks he's onto a winner because he's in the sign of Capricorn, which is his own sign. But Pluto is a bigger player than Saturn, and Pluto will bring transfiguration and transformation into your life, whether you like it or not. So part of your psychology will be that Saturn makes you feel safe because you know where the limitations are, you know where the boundaries are, you know what your structures are, and you don't want to change them because you feel comfortable there. So this is really about breaking through a glass ceiling, really about stepping out of the comfort zone, because Pluto will not let you stay in those old structures. And you've got to take that on the chin and work with it. Otherwise, you will feel ground down and exhausted and burnt out. So look to your personal chart, check out which area the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is placed in right now for you, and then look at that area of your life and identify what is going on and identify where you can willingly take down old structures and allow Pluto to bring that light of his. He's the Lord of the Underworld, but he brings a very bright light into people's lives. He energizes what you can do in the world, transforms you, and then you will truly radiate your personal divine energy in the world.